Anna sat on the living room couch, staring into space. Her mind relentlessly replayed the events of the past few days. The call from the Human Resources Department still echoed in her memory. "Unfortunately, we need to terminate your contract." The job she loved so much, which represented stability and purpose, had slipped through her fingers like sand. As if that weren't enough, the doctor she had seen weeks ago had brought her another devastating piece of news. Her difficulty getting pregnant could be permanent. It was as if life had closed all the doors at once, leaving Anna in a dark hallway with no way out. Before, she had believed her faith was strong and unshakable, but now she found herself questioning everything. She prayed every night, but the answers never came. She felt that God was silent, watching from afar as she struggled to keep up appearances. The sun was streaming in weakly through the half-open curtains, illuminating the piles of bills on the table. Her husband, Ricardo, tried to cheer her up with encouraging words, but not even he seemed to believe them. He was tired too, struggling to maintain hope as the weight of responsibilities grew. Anna wanted to be strong, but it seemed like her world was falling apart, piece by piece, while she was powerless to react. That morning, she decided to leave the house to breathe. She walked to a nearby park, where the silence was broken only by the birdsong and the sound of leaves blowing in the wind. She sat on a wooden bench and let the tears fall freely. It was there, in the middle of that empty and calm space, that she allowed herself to feel all the pain she kept inside her. In her mind, the question echoed like a scream. Why, God? Why me? What have I done to deserve this? The weight of frustrated expectations and broken dreams crushed her soul. What bothered her most was not only the lack of answers, but the feeling that God had moved away. She looked up at the cloudy sky, as if searching for a sign, anything that could give her the strength to carry on. As she sat there, a lady passed by and sat down next to her, holding a rosary in her hands. The woman didn't say anything for a few minutes, just stood there, looking at the landscape. But before she left, she looked at Anna with a soft smile and said, "Sometimes, when we are in the valley, God is just teaching us to wait. He never abandons us, my daughter." The woman's words were etched in Anna's mind. Even though she didn't know her, she felt that there was something special about that encounter. Still, the pain didn't diminish. God's silence remained an open wound in her heart, and she didn't know how to deal with it. As she walked home, Anna wondered if she could make it through another day, but something in that sentence had planted a seed of hope, still small, but present. The days that followed were marked by a strange mixture of weariness and expectation. The words of the lady in the park continued to echo in Anna's mind, but they seemed distant, almost unreal, when compared to the difficulties of everyday life. She prayed, even though she didn't know what else to ask for. Between tears and silence, she begged for a way out, an answer that would bring meaning to everything she was experiencing. It was on a particularly difficult night that something happened. Ricardo, seeing her sitting on the edge of the bed with a lost look in her eyes, suggested that they watch an online service. He knew that, although Anna's doubts had grown, she still clung to the idea that God might be listening. Reluctantly, she agreed. The pastor who led the service spoke about promises, and his message seemed to be aimed directly at Anna. He quoted passages from the Bible that spoke about waiting on the Lord, trusting in God's plans even when everything seemed lost. At one point, he declared, "There is someone here who needs to hear this. God has not forgotten you. The promise he made will be fulfilled, but in his time, not yours." Those words made Anna's heart race. Although she was skeptical about signs, she could not ignore the power with which that message had reached her. It was as if, for a brief moment, God had broken the silence. Something inside her told her that this moment was no coincidence. After that night, Anna began to seek answers more intentionally. She began reading the scriptures, trying to understand what it meant to wait for God's timing. However, this search was not without its frustrations. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, nothing seemed to change. The promise continued to go unfulfilled, and the waiting became more and more unbearable. She watched friends advance in their careers, build families, live the dreams she had set for herself. The feeling of stagnation was suffocating. At times, she felt like she was being punished for something she couldn't quite put her finger on. And although she wanted to believe that God's promise was real, doubt kept whispering in her mind, "What if you're waiting for something that will never happen?" But even in the midst of uncertainty, Anna didn't give up completely. She remembered the words from the service and the lady in the park. Although it was difficult, There was a spark inside her that refused to go out. Maybe, just maybe, there was a purpose to her waiting. But what was it? Anna felt the weight of the waiting like a storm that would never pass. Yet Scripture began to become an anchor in the midst of her turmoil. She began to meditate often on a passage the pastor had quoted that night of service. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29 verse 11. These words offered momentary relief, but the pain of the delay still lingered. Anna wondered why God's timing had to be so different from hers. Some nights, she would read Psalm 40 verse 1 over and over, as if she could convince herself of what it said. "I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry." Still, patience seemed out of reach. Each new month without answers made her heart waver. The faith she had tried to build felt like a house of sand, ready to collapse at the slightest sign of frustration. One day, Anna confided in Ricardo, confessing that she envied those who seemed to have their lives sorted out. "I know that's wrong," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But sometimes I wonder if God really hears me." Richard, who also relied on faith to keep going, responded gently but firmly. "Do you remember Abraham? God promised that he would be the father of a great nation, but he had to wait decades to see the promise fulfilled. The wait was difficult, but God's faithfulness never failed. Perhaps he is preparing us for something greater." Ricardo's words made her reflect. However, she also remembered Sarah, Abraham's wife, who tried to take matters into her own hands, leading Abraham to have a son with her servant. Anna felt she was at a crossroads. Should she continue to wait or try to take matters into her own hands? At that time, her relationship with God oscillated between trust and doubt. Still, she found comfort in small reminders from Scripture, such as Isaiah 40 verse 31, "But those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint." These words planted a small flame of strength in her heart, even though the future remained uncertain. After so many months living in the shadow of uncertainty, Anna began to realize that waiting, painful as it was transforming her in subtle ways. She noticed that her prayer, which had previously been full of requests and anguish, began to change its tone. She no longer said only, "Lord, give me what I need," but also, "Lord, teach me to wait as you want." It was a difficult prayer, almost contrary to her anxious nature, but little by little she began to accept that perhaps waiting was part of the plan. One rainy afternoon, while leafing through her Bible, Anna came across a verse that seemed to jump off the page. "The plans of a man's heart come, but the Lord's lips give an answer." Proverbs 16 verse 9. These words brought a mixture of comfort and confrontation. Anna realized that she had tried to control the uncontrollable, but now she understood that control had never really been in her hands. It was then that something extraordinary happened. That week, Anna received an unexpected invitation from a childhood friend, Camila, whom she hadn't seen in years. Camila invited her to a spiritual retreat. At first, Anna was hesitant. Her schedule was so busy that taking a weekend off seemed impossible. But Ricardo, always supportive, encouraged her. "Maybe that's what you need. Sometimes God speaks to us better when we are away from the noise of our lives." During the retreat, Anna experienced something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. During one of the moments of reflection, the leader of the meeting read Psalm 46 verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." These words echoed deep within Anna's soul, as if they were addressed directly to her. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to fight the silence. Instead, she embraced it. During a group dynamic, Anna was encouraged to share her story. Although she was reluctant at first, she ended up talking about her struggles, her doubts, and her waiting. When he finished, the leader looked at her with a calm smile and said, "Anna, have you ever considered that God is not only preparing what you asked for, but also preparing you to receive it? Sometimes the greatest miracle is not what God does for us, but what he does in us during the wait." These words brought a flash of understanding. Anna realized that throughout her journey of waiting, God had not been silent. He was shaping her faith, her patience, and her dependence on him. The wait was not a punishment, but an opportunity to grow spiritually. When the retreat ended, Anna returned home with a new perspective. The promise she had been waiting for had not yet arrived, but something inside her had changed. She felt a peace that had previously seemed impossible. She began to meditate frequently on Romans 8 verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. This inner renewal also began to be reflected in her actions. Anna began serving in the local church, helping with charitable projects and dedicating her time to causes that she previously lacked the courage or willingness to tackle. Interestingly, the more she dedicated herself to others, the less burdensome her own waiting seemed. And then, one ordinary morning, while taking care of one of the church projects, Anna realized something. She had stopped counting the days. The anxiety that had previously dominated her mind had given way to a calm trust in God's timing. It was as if light had finally begun to shine in her darkness. Summer arrived, and with it, a sense of renewal took over Anna's life. The tranquility she now felt was not due to a lack of challenges, but to the way she faced them. She finally understood that, in many moments, life would be a matter of trust. The Lord, always present, guided each step with precision, even though the path was not always visible. It was on a sunny afternoon, during a quiet conversation with Ricardo, that something unexpected happened. Anna, without realizing it, began to talk about her childhood dreams, those dreams she had kept in the drawer of her soul for so long. She spoke of her desire to be a mother, to raise a family full of love and joy, but also of her fear that it would never happen. Ricardo, observing the depth of her heart, responded with a serenity that was now so familiar. Anna, perhaps what you need is not an immediate answer, but an unshakable confidence that what is to come will be better than anything you can imagine. These words, simple but powerful, touched the depths of Anna's heart. She remembered how, in moments of despair, she had prayed, but at the same time, questioned God's timing. Was she missing something? Had God already heard her pleas? But in that moment, a deep peace took hold of her. Something inside Anna changed at that moment, and she felt ready for something new. Trusting in God's timing, which until then had been a constant struggle, now seemed natural. She remembered Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. And it was when Anna least expected it that the miracle began to take shape. Not in something grand or immediate, but in a small detail that she had overlooked. A month later, she was having a routine checkup, and during the appointment, the doctor said to her with a smile, "Anna, I have good news. You are pregnant." Those words were like a burst of light in her life. For a moment, she could not believe it. But soon she felt God's presence like never before, confirming that he was always in control. She remembered a passage she had read a long time ago, "For with God nothing shall be impossible." Luke 1 verse 37. The news of her pregnancy was a turning point for Anna, but not only because it meant she would be a mother. The greatest miracle was the transformation she had experienced up until that point. The time she had waited, the trust in God, the patience she had built up over the months. Everything had led Anna to a place of deep spiritual growth, where she could finally see God's hand moving in her life in a clear and unmistakable way. Still, the experience was not just one of joy. Anna knew that the challenges of being a mother would be many, and she felt a little fearful about this new journey. But she knew that, as always, God would guide her. Her heart was at peace, because she understood that waiting was not just about receiving something, but about being transformed. She trusted that the best was yet to come. Anna and Ricardo shared the news with their friends and family, and words of wisdom and joy began to flood their home. What had seemed impossible had become a reality. And as she reflected on all that she had experienced, one word kept repeating in her mind. In its time the Lord makes everything beautiful. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11. Hannah's journey had not been easy. There had been days of anguish, uncertainty, and even anger, but as she looked back, she saw how God had worked in her life, shaping it with care and love. And as her due date approached, Hannah felt more confident than ever, knowing that every step she had taken in the process of waiting had been a preparation for the great moment that was to come. Anna looked at the face of her son, now 2 months old, and couldn't help but smile. He was in her arms, full of life and promise, a gift from God that seemed to have arrived at the perfect time. The miracle she had been patiently waiting for was now a tangible reality, and her heart overflowed with gratitude. She looked at Ricardo, who was watching her with a satisfied smile, and her husband's words echoed in her mind. Waiting is never easy, but God always knows the right time. Little Samuel, with his bright eyes, seemed to be the embodiment of God's promise. As Anna gently rocked him, she remembered how much her faith had been tested, how much her trust had been challenged. But when she saw that innocent little face, she knew that every tear, every unanswered prayer in that moment, had been part of God's plan to bring her to this point. The road to this moment had been long and, at many moments, it seemed uncertain. Anna remembered when she thought she would never be able to be a mother, when she felt anxiety about the future taking over her. But over time, she learned to trust the Lord and accept that the wait was not a punishment, but a blessing in disguise, an opportunity for her to grow in faith and patience. As she reflected on her journey, Anna meditated on the words that the leader of the spiritual retreat had once said to her: "God is not only preparing what you asked for, but He is preparing you to receive it." That was it. God had worked in her heart, breaking down the barriers of fear and insecurity, transforming her into the woman she needed to be the mother of precious Samuel. The time of waiting was not in vain. As she recovered from the experience of childbirth, Anna felt the Holy Spirit close by, guiding her steps. The verse from Isaiah 55 verse 9 became a mantra in her mind. "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." She knew that in the end, God's wisdom would always surpass any human understanding. His plan was perfect, and she was beginning to understand this in an even deeper way. Samuel's arrival was a constant reminder to Hannah that God does not delay. He arrives at just the right time, and when He does, He brings with Him all the blessings we could not imagine. Hannah felt completely at peace, knowing that her journey of waiting had not only led her to a place of fulfilled promises, but also to a place of deep spiritual maturity. Now, with Samuel in her arms, Hannah understood the true meaning of faith. She realized that trusting in God does not mean that everything will happen immediately or according to our own desires, but that in the end, everything happens according to His will, which is always good, perfect, and pleasing. Hannah also knew that her journey did not end with Samuel's arrival. The learning of waiting would continue throughout her life, as would her constant trust in the Lord. She had already experienced the most important miracles: the miracle of trusting and learning, the miracle of surrendering herself to God's timing, and the miracle of knowing that as long as we are willing to wait, God always fulfills His promises. With a smile, Anna looked at Ricardo and said, "It was worth the wait. Now we can see with our own eyes what God has prepared for us." As the sun set over the horizon, she felt at peace, knowing that her story of waiting, now filled with gratitude, would be a constant testimony that in God's timing, everything happens perfectly. Anna's story is a powerful reminder that God's timing is always perfect, even when we don't fully understand it. Her journey of waiting, faith, and transformation reflects the biblical truth that God often calls us to trust in His timing, even when it seems to be delayed or different from what we expect. Anna not only received the gift of being a mother, but more importantly, she experienced the process of being shaped by patience, trust, and unwavering faith. She learned that true beauty is not in the speed of answers or the immediate fulfillment of our desires, but in the journey of trusting God and seeing His will fulfilled in His timing. Throughout her journey, Hannah found herself transformed. She understood that, in waiting, God works in us, perfecting us, molding us into the person He wants us to be. As it is written in Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11, God has made everything beautiful in its time, not in our time, but in divine time, where everything has a purpose and meaning that goes beyond our understanding. God's promise was fulfilled in Hannah's life, but the greatest miracle was not only the arrival of Samuel, but also how much she grew in faith and trust. The time of waiting became fertile ground for spiritual maturity. When we look at our own lives, we may ask ourselves, are we willing to wait for God's timing? Or do we seek quick answers and forget that, in the waiting, God is preparing us for something greater? Anna teaches us that, although waiting can be difficult and challenging, it is not in vain. God has a perfect plan for each of us, and when we trust in His timing, we see the beauty of His work manifesting in our lives. The best is yet to come, and when the time comes, we will see that everything happened according to His purpose, in a complete and perfect way. Just like Anna, we can trust in God's timing and learn that, by waiting, He transforms us, strengthens us, and prepares us to receive what He already has in store for us. We have reached the end of this message, and I want to thank you immensely for taking the time to listen to this story of faith, patience, and trust in God's perfect timing. May Anna's story touch your heart and reinforce the importance of trusting in what God has in store for each of us. Now, if you received this message with an open heart and are ready to follow this path of faith, please confirm receipt of this special message by quoting the number 333 in the comments. This helps us know that you are with us on this journey. Don't forget to join our channel by subscribing and activating the notification bell, so that you don't miss the next powerful messages we have for you. Stay tuned, because in our next videos, we will bring more messages from the angels, full of light, love, and guidance for your life. May God bless your every step, and may you feel closer to His purpose every day. See you soon.